All right, so we want to respect everybody's time here, so let's go ahead and get started. So thanks for joining us today. I am Jason Dahl, aka Financial Plan Man, and I am a certified financial planner and the director of financial planning services at AFS. And I am here today remotely, of course, with my colleague Alp Adebeck, the founder and managing partner of AFS. We're excited for the 10th session of our annual monthly webinar series for 2020 today. And if you've missed any of our past sessions, make sure you head to our YouTube page. I think you can just search AFS Financial Group, Alp Adebeck, and Jason Dahl to check out all of our past workshop recordings. We are recording today's workshop, and this will be added to that list as well. So today we will be discussing what we call coupling your finances. And before we dive into that, I want to just remind everybody to please feel free to ask questions at any time during today's webinar. You can ask a question by typing it into the Q&A or the chat link. Either one works. There should be a little control panel that you can see. There's a Q&A link you can click on and it opens up a dialog box, or the chat box. Either of those work. And we will keep our eye out for those. And I also want to encourage you to follow up with us after the session. If you have further questions, or if you would like to schedule a time to review a few things over Zoom or via phone. We love what we do, and probably the best part of what we do is connecting with people and helping you solve personal financial planning puzzles. So please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, without further ado, let's get started. You ready, Alp?
I am.
All right. So let's get right in here to our first slide.
So this is something that I feel after 32 years of marriage that I can actually say I've got some experience in working together with Karen, my wonderful wife. So the characteristics of successful partnerships, I mean, number one, they work together. Jason, I lost. Do you still have me?
Yep. We still got you.
And I probably throw out this caveat. I am in downtown Bethesda at the office, and there's been a tremendous amount of construction right next to our building. And every once in a while, our internet at the office goes out. So if you see me blank out, it's not that I just got tired of giving the presentation. Comcast cutting our cable, or somebody cutting Comcast cables. But anyway, characteristics of a successful partnership. What we've seen over the years working with our clients is that they work together, right? A big issue. They don't hide things from each other. You know, they set financial goals and they work together to accomplish them. They talk openly about their finances, and probably a big one, because we know this happens a lot in the earlier years of some partnerships, is that people tend to hide expenses from each other. So they really have to be an open book. And this next slide actually summarizes it really well. 94% of people describe their marriage as great, so they talk with their partner about their money dreams on at least a weekly basis. We found that number to be surprising when it came to like a weekly basis, but I know in my own relationship, it's working together whenever there were, I'll say, the bigger hurdles to get over, where, you know, getting our kids through college, paying all those bills, you know, whether it's private school tuitions and any kind of major expenses, working together and talking about it really was the cornerstone of making the relationship successful.
Totally agreed. Hey, so I'm gonna, all right, here we are, we're good here. So this is the hierarchy of financial needs. So this is something that our team here at AFS put together, working with our sister entity, AFS 401k Retirement Services, as a result of meeting literally with thousands of people over the years. And the most common question, really kind of the heart of that question, was always around, what's my next best move, right? Or what's the next best thing I should do with my money, right? And so that's why we sort of built this, modeled after Maslow's hierarchy of needs, many of you are probably familiar with. So we start at, you know, the basics, the foundations there at the bottom, with having, you know, an absolute minimum of an emergency savings, and then work our way up to the top. And now everybody is somewhere on this hierarchy. All of us are. Sometimes we might have one foot in one level and another foot in another level, right? We're going to be straddling a few layers. In a perfect world, right, we would all just sort of progress step by step all the way up to the top. That's not the reality, right? We end up kind of jumping around. Things happen, and especially, right, if you're a couple coming together, and we're gonna kind of interchangeably use the term couples or marriage, but really what we're talking about today is just any couple who's serious enough to be contemplating bringing their finances together. Okay, and so each of you, kind of to Alp's point, I think this is a great starting point to as a couple to sort of get a sense for, oh, okay, where am I on this? Where are you on this hierarchy, kind of, right, in your financial hierarchy or financial path? And this can really serve as a great kind of starting point, not only for yourself but as a couple to definitely identify, all right, where am I now? What are our goals? And you can kind of talk about, hey, when you sort of get to the middle or the top half, hey, what are we saving for, right? Are we putting away what we want to for retirement? What are our goals, right? And so forth. And we'll talk a little bit more about all of that as we progress throughout. So as I just mentioned, right, so the three main categories that we kind of cover in today's conversation, just sort of maybe first marriages with similar levels of assets coming together. And again, when I say marriage, not necessarily it has to be a marriage, right? Okay, it may just be a couple, as I said, serious enough to be contemplating, combining finances. Maybe it's a first marriage or first partnership with a large disparity in assets. And we'll also talk a little bit about, hey, maybe it's not the first rodeo for you.
So when it comes to setting goals, for couples, it's good to think about like your top financial goals. So sit down and prioritize them. And I like to say at times there have to be sacrifices made to accomplish some of the goals. If you have credit card debt and you're coming together and your goal is to just get that cleaned up, it really takes both parties to work hard to actually reduce spending and focus on just paying off that debt. But what we have here, are some of the common goals. So buying a home, eliminating credit card debt, saving for a family, paying off student loans. On the next slide, we've got paying off that mortgage, saving for retirement, taking that dream vacation, funding college for the kids. So, your goals might be a little bit different, but in working with clients over the years, these are the main goals that we've seen. And really the way to attack them is working together, deciding what the top priorities are and just developing a plan to tackle those goals.
I know one thing, just throwing something that my wife and I have often done over the years is, at some point, oftentimes, kind of early in the calendar year, if we're on a long drive or something, we'll throw out, okay, what do we want to accomplish this year? What do we really want to, kind of make sure we prioritize and keep that ball moving forward towards, many of these same kinds of goals.
And I know we've worked with a few people in the past that have also done something very similar at the end of the year. They kind of do a state of the family's balance sheet at the end of the
Yeah.
year, just to kind of review where everything is and make sure everybody's on the same page and understand where the assets are and, what progress they've made towards those goals. So same thing, but kind of beginning, end of the year type of deal.
Yep.
So top areas you should address, big thing we see is whether people merge assets. And so on that first marriage, usually there's not that many assets to merge. So, when Jason mentioned about the three different types of marriages we typically see. So if it's two people coming together with very few assets, most people just commingle everything. They've got joint bank accounts. They might each have like their own separate individual accounts because they're paying certain bills themselves. But for the most part, we see people kind of move things together. When it comes to insurance policies, you really need to address what types of life insurance policies you want to get. You want to address, the outstanding debts, like whether you need to get an estate plan in place. And also, if you're talking about kids, you're going to be working? So, you need to like focus on all those type of topics before you move ahead.
Mm-hmm. And perhaps the most kind of basic, right, and foundational, important piece is the dreaded B word, budgeting, or cash flow management, or however you want to think about it. But the reality is, right, everybody needs to kind of know how much you have coming in and going out each month, right? That's probably the biggest. How you go about doing that varies, and we've seen a lot of different strategies or tools that people do to figure that out or get their hands wrapped around that. But the most important piece is that you don't just bury your head in the sand, right? And we've also seen, and I've been guilty of this myself in the past, where life just gets rolling, and before you realize it, you're sort of like, wow, where did all the money go, right? What have we been spending on? And so, periodically connecting with yourself and your significant other, and putting on that, the household CFO hat, and really digging in to say, all right, what do we have coming in? What's going out? I know one of the strategies, or a few of the kind of sample strategies. Of course, there's the classic, get a spreadsheet, right, and detail everything out. I know a number of folks that really like that, right? They're really detail oriented in that regard. That works for them. Look, that's not for everybody, right? That just sounds like the worst thing in the world to some folks, right? Just spending time in a spreadsheet. So it doesn't have to be that route, right? There's a lot of online tools to help with budgeting, but one of the other ways that I've kind of found with my spouse that works, given our kind of mix of personalities. I tended to be a little bit more of the spreadsheet person. That might be shocking, where my wife was not so much a spreadsheet person. And so we've discovered that, if we focus on the goals and what we need to be saving to get to those goals, right? So, hey, we have a couple kids saving for college, making sure we have that emergency fund. We want to retire someday, so saving for retirement. We want to, be able to go on vacations, right? Saving for those. What other goals, and really focus on what we need to save to reach all of those. Then, kind of what's left, we spend, and we don't really worry about kind of what we're spending it on, because we've focused on in our case, hey, and we periodically sort of check back in, are we hitting our savings goals? So that's one approach that's kind of worked for us. Let's talk a little bit more about the savings buckets, right? So if you harken back to that hierarchy, right, you saw that at the baseline there was kind of the most basic of emergency savings, right? But hopefully for everybody on this call, you're kind of moved up beyond that level. If not, right, maybe you're hitting on some of the other areas, and you realize, oh, you know what, I don't kind of have that liquid emergency savings that might be just cash in the bank. It might be money in a health savings account, right, for a medical kind of emergency. Right, and then retirement, right? Everybody wants to make work optional at some point in their life, I'm sure. I've yet to meet somebody who didn't want to at least have that option. And so one of the questions that we often get asked is, well, I have many competing goals along with my retirement, and where should I prioritize? And again, that's kind of back to the hierarchy, and you'll notice that the retirement piece comes first. First, it starts with making sure at the bare minimum you're getting any company match, right? So hopefully no one on here is missing out on free money, right? So if your company through a 401k or 403b offers some kind of free match, make sure you're contributing at the bare minimum enough to capture that, right? But then as you're able to save more, you really should prioritize your retirement over things, even, and as painful this might sound for some folks, even for college savings, right? Because just to be blunt, right, folks can still get loans for college, kids can still get loans for college. No one's ever going to give us, an unsecured loan for retirement, right? So that's one simple thing to remember. And then the goals, right? That whether it be, to get us down payment for a house, that a really big kind of bucket list vacation, or buying a second house, right? So all those things need to fit into the piece, into the overall hierarchy.
So the debt word, probably the biggest cause of strife in relationships. It's good for both parties to really understand where they stand with the different types of debts, the balances, required minimum payments, interest rates. And so if you think about it, whatever you can do to reduce debts and get down to where the last debt is the mortgage, try to get everything else all paid off. So you're going to need a plan to do it. And I remember going through my marriage counseling classes, and the couple that hosted the various couples that were getting married, basically talked about what they did when they got married. Is they talked about their bills, and they said when they buy a house, they were just going to be completely focused on paying off that debt. And at the time that they were hosting the meeting, they had said that they were basically debt free, and it was at a fairly young age that they had attained that goal. And it was really something that stuck with me my whole life. Just 32 years later, I still remember them talking about it. So they made it a point to really understand their debt situation, and they developed a plan to pay it off. And they had a number of kids too, so they must have had buy-in with the kids that they were going to focus very hard on just paying off the house, and from there they would then maybe start enjoying some of the fruits of their labor. But just really a good thing to understand.
Mhm. So kind of on a related note, let's talk credit scores. Obviously, I'm sure all of you know, right? Credit score is one of, if not the most important components for when you want to, borrow money, take on any new debt. And while maybe you don't necessarily need to talk about it on the first date, but maybe on the second date, right? Or if you're getting serious, it's one of those things that you probably want to be aware of, obviously for yourself, but for your significant other. Hey, what's your credit score? Kind of what's your debt history? Like Alp was talking about, what kind of debt are you sort of bringing into the relationship? But then what's your individual credit scores? Because that's really going to kind of influence your ability as a couple to apply for loans, right? Whether it be a car loan, mortgage, etc. And in some cases there might be a disparity between the scores, right? And so that might impact your strategy around, oh, we want to get a mortgage, so does it make sense to have it in both of our names? Well, but one of us, if there's a big disparity in credit scores, maybe we should just do it in one of, instead of both of our names, do it in just one of our names. Right, so I know it's not the sexiest of topics to be talking about with a loved one, but it's important and it's relevant, and it can really help. If we go back to that very first comment that Alp was talking about, like the traits of successful couples, is don't shy away from it, don't hide from it. Hey, getting into a relationship means all of this stuff, including credit scores. When we were getting ready for this presentation, I was informed of a fun fact here that apparently researchers have found a correlation between your credit score and the long-term success of your relationship. Not surprising, but that the thing that I thought was interesting is there is even a dating app that matches people based on their credit score. I've not had the opportunity to check that out, but if anybody
You're already married, Jason.
Yeah, so hopefully I will avoid that, but if anybody does, give us a review. All right, so one of the other areas, right, that's important to consider as a couple, and really for anybody, it's recommended to kind of think about and at least do a mental accounting or review, if not physically looking at your wills and your beneficiary designations every year, right? Kind of part of that state of the household that Al talked about, to just say, all right, first and foremost, it's a simple thing, but it's one of the things that we see errors or mistakes or oversights happen a lot, and that's with beneficiary designations, right? So if you think about it, your retirement plans at work, right? Whether it's a thrift savings plan, 401k, 403b, and so on, those accounts all have beneficiary designations. And just if you're not sure, right, beneficiary designation, all that means is that if you pass away, who gets that account, right? You typically will name a primary beneficiary and a contingent beneficiary. And it could be more than one person at each level. But your IRAs, individual retirement accounts, Roth, traditional, SEP, so forth, those all have beneficiary designations. Life insurance policies all have beneficiary designations. If you have an annuity, annuities have beneficiary designations. Those are probably all the kind of most common areas. And that's where it's really important that if you're having a major life event, whether that's kind of adding to the family, right, through coupling or kids, or if there's been a subtraction from the family, right, whether there's been a divorce or a death in the family, those are all kind of triggering events that you should really say, oh, do I need to make adjustments to my beneficiary designations, right? It's really important when you think about beneficiary designations and wills. We've definitely heard many people say, oh, well, you know what, I outline in my will what I want to have happen to everything. That's great, but the beneficiary designations on any of those accounts that I talked about earlier will supersede the will, okay? There was even a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. There was I believe it was the husband. Husband and wife were married when they were in their 20s, divorced relatively early in their marriage, and then the husband remarried and then was remarried to a second wife for, I forget, maybe like 30 years. All of the, the will outlined everything to go to the, to the second spouse, but he had forgotten to change the beneficiary on an old retirement account. He still listed the first wife. And even though all the evidence sort of showed, hey, his intention was to go to his second wife, that beneficiary superseded. So one of those areas, it's an easy thing to correct or to update or review. And then same thing, wills, same sort of thing, right? So anything that doesn't have a beneficiary designation will pass based on your will, right? So then it's kind of, the same basic concept is, hey, you want to think about, oh, who would I want to get the house, right? Who would I want to get the cash in the bank accounts, cars, personal possessions? Those are all kind of a lot of the common assets that pass via a will. All right, so if we kind of take it a step further and thinking about, potentially more complex estate planning, and probably the most common scenario where we sort of see things getting a little bit more complex is in a second marriage, or a kind of a second blending of families or finances, right? So if you had a family with kids from a first relationship, and then now you're in a subsequently new relationship, right? There might be a scenario where you simply say, all right, if something were to happen to me, I might want to ensure that now my second spouse or second significant other is taken care of while they're still alive. But ultimately, kind of the assets maybe that I had accumulated prior to that second relationship, I want those to go to my kids from the first relationship. Right? I'm sure many of you can kind of understand, that dynamic is fairly common, right? And so that's going to require a little bit more complex planning, typically through the use of a trust. Okay. Now, all of these kind of documents, the wills, any trusts, right, powers of attorney, those are all documents that you need to sit down with an estate attorney, right, and have an actual estate attorney work through and draft those documents. Beneficiary designations, you can just do that on yourself, through your work plan or through your financial advisor, so forth. But for the more complex planning and the basic estate documents, you'll want to work with an estate attorney. I realize we're just kind of scratching the surface on a lot of these things. These are a lot of topics that we help clients sort of think through strategically. We're not estate attorneys, we don't draft the documents, but we have a lot of experience in kind of understanding, okay, we're here, this is what we would want to have happen under various scenarios, kind of map that out and making it very understandable and easier for them to have it executed with an estate attorney.
Yeah, and I know one thing to add here is this is something that we see always evolving. So the longer there is a complex situation, I'll call it that second marriage, we see people alter beneficiaries. If somebody's second marriage is 15, 20 years, you'll see things change, and they might develop other plans of how to take care of the kids from the first marriage.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's a great point, right? So maybe that second relationship is now, kind of grown in length and commitment and trust and whatnot, but also as a result, right, the kids from the first marriage are now older, right, and they're now more established, right? So that dynamic can change over time, and your estate plan should change over time. I should also note your beneficiary designations don't have to be the same across all of the various assets, right? So you could, for example, name the spouse the beneficiary of retirement accounts, and there's tax benefits to having a spouse inherit retirement accounts compared to a non-spouse, whether it be a kid or a sibling or a parent or anybody, right? That's kind of the important distinction: a spouse versus a non-spouse inheriting a retirement account. So there's a lot of benefits of having retirement accounts go to a spouse, and then you might name maybe the kids as beneficiaries of life insurance policies, because life insurance, death benefit comes in tax-free. That can be also part of the planning. So they don't all have to be the same. And that's part of the strategy that we often help folks think through is, oh, what asset makes the most sense for what for what beneficiary? So speaking of insurance, the insurance, again, it's not one of the sexiest of topics, but it's one of those things where, when you need it, you really need it, right? And you're really glad you have it, whether it be life insurance, right? No one really likes to contemplate our own demise, but I know for me personally, it was really important to just have that peace of mind that, gosh, if anything happened to me, I know that my family would get enough in life insurance to be okay, right? And that they can keep saving and pay for college, right? Be able to pay off debts, and so forth. That was really important to me to just have that peace of mind. So for most folks, just having their work provided maybe 1 or 2 times your salary, especially while you're earlier in your career, is almost never enough. Right? Everybody's situation is different. It's one of those things to always review to possibly complement, supplement what you get through an employer coverage to go out and get some of your own coverage. Similar with disability insurance, right? If you were disabled, lost your income, if your spouse were disabled and lost his or her income, would there still be enough money, right, coming in to cover the bills, right, to keep saving for the goals? Same deal to think about disability insurance. Part of the kind of evolution of insurance that we often see is as folks get later in their career, right, and there are fewer years left to kind of insure the risk of lost income, right? The need for life insurance, the need for disability starts to reduce, and for some folks, it may even go away entirely. But then we often see the emphasis shift to something like long-term care insurance. Just a couple points there to always remember: long-term care insurance is different than health insurance, right? Health insurance is for medical expenses. Long-term care insurance is for like custodial care or maintenance care, right? So any kind of health insurance, such as Medicare, do not pay for custodial or maintenance or long-term care. So that's another sort of shift in priorities. And insurance, I'll just say, when you're thinking about couples or blending of families, like we were just talking about on the earlier slide, can really solve a lot of potential problems, right? Or kind of, if something were to happen to you and you know, gosh, I've got multiple sort of family members that I want to take care of. Well, through the use of insurance, you can often fix or smooth over a lot of those issues. Again, it all depends on, are you insurable, right? There's a lot more details to it, but those are some of the thoughts that kind of go into determining what's the appropriate type and amount of insurance.
So this is probably one of the simplest things one can do when they are joining together with somebody, is to review each person's, if they're both working, review each person's employer benefits, and you try to maximize just what's available to you. I look at my own personal situation. I've been self-employed my whole life, and my wife has worked for Montgomery County Public Schools, which generally is considered to have what I'll call Cadillac benefits. And so it was easy in our situation. When it came to health insurance, we just went on her plan because they offered great family coverage. Other things you want to look at and coordinate are 401k plans. And one of the things that we see a lot happen is we'll see one person maximize the amount they can put into the 401k. So let's say they're putting in, if they're 50 and over, they're putting in $26,000 into the plan. But the other spouse is not even participating, and we'd be better off in that situation learning if the other spouse that's not participating has a free match that they're giving up. So, we're better off putting less in the other plan and initiating the second plan and trying to maximize what we'll call that free money, that free matching contribution that the employer is making. You also want to coordinate things like flexible spending accounts, health saving accounts, the life insurance that's offered through the benefits. So just want to go through the full menu of both spouses' benefit plans, and just make sure you're setting it up to where you've got the best, and I'll say the best financial decisions being made.
Yeah, collectively, for sure.
So lots of different types of marriages, as we said in the beginning, the multi-generational household. So you want to take a look at what does your family payroll look like? Like if you've got, a couple of families coming together where you've got kids from both families, if you've got responsibilities for paying for parents, so you want to basically look through everything when you're coming together on a marriage. Like, will there be additional expenses that you're going to have to think about down the road? You might have a special needs situation where, your spouse's family has somebody that somebody's going to have to pay for later on in life. So you want to make sure you look at all these various possibilities that could affect your overall retirement plan. Lots of different expenses that could come into play. Like, we've had examples over the years of somebody saying that, oh, one thing we didn't tell you about our retirement plan is I've got to help pay for my brother, typically about $1,000 a month, but it'll probably go up later on to $1,500 a month. So, all those things need to be incorporated into a plan.
Yeah, one of the phrases that we've kind of see come up over the recent years is referring to what's called the sandwich generation, right? And the idea being that some folks are now kind of sandwiched in between maybe an adult child who, for whatever reason, might have come home, right? We're obviously seeing that play out even more in 2020, and so that you're financially supporting or helping an adult child who you hope will be off the family payroll eventually, right, and standing on their own, but then also sandwiched with having to help with a parent, right? And it's one of those things where it's just going to become more and more an issue across the country. Is gosh, I have an aging parent, and okay, they have some savings, but do they have long-term care insurance? Do they have enough savings, enough assets to be able to afford if they need to have someone come into the house, right, to help, or if they're going to need more care than that in assisted living, or gosh, do we need to consider building, an in-law suite in our house to care for them, right? That is one of those risks or monkey wrenches that can get thrown into the best laid plans. And that's one of the things that we always talk about, is whether it's for our clients in their life, or even for their extended family, make sure you have a plan, right? Insurance can be a part of that plan, but make sure you have a plan at least to think through, okay, what if that scenario plays out and you need to care for an elderly parent, or in your own life if you or your significant other were to need long-term care.
So now we've already talked about this a little bit. So the big question is whether you merge assets or not merge assets. And we said that that first marriage, same level of assets, we typically see everything come together. And so I'm going to actually ask Jason to kind of go to the next slide, and we'll talk about the top tips. And when it comes to that first marriage and same level of assets, we really do see most people just commingle everything, and they set up joint financial goals and they work together to achieve those goals. So that's generally the easiest one. Next one becomes a little bit more complex. So it's the first marriage and disparity in assets. And we're seeing this more and more. And at times I'll say we're seeing this more and more where I'll call it the parents are getting involved. And what I mean by that is, we've had situations where, one of our clients will come to us and they'll say one of their kids is getting married, and this particular client might have a lot of assets, and the person that their child is marrying doesn't really have much in assets. And so, they ask what the best tips are there. And so typically it's something that needs to be discussed in the beginning, and there's that potential for that prenuptial agreement. So, there may not be as much commingling in that first marriage, but disparity in assets, but it is really important to talk about it in advance, and I'll say well in advance of the union, because we know this can be a very, very tricky topic. Again, we talk about it over and over again with clients, and like they want to know, like, how much can they get involved in it, and they don't want to see any kind of resentment with their new son-in-law or daughter-in-law. So it's something that really takes a lot of what I'll call long-range planning. So not your first marriage. We've talked about this. This is the one that is really complex on a lot of fronts. As we said, if there's children from prior marriages, there's just a lot of issues with beneficiary designations. And this is the one that I think, both parties really need to sit down and just pencil everything out. If the kids are grown, it's a lot easier. So if it's two people come together later on in life and kids are already grown, still complex on dividing up assets after you're both gone. But if it's a situation like we have one right now where we've got somebody come together with somebody that's younger, this our client has already paid for college for his kids, and now he's getting together with somebody that's a lot younger that has kids that still need to go to college. And so it's just trying to understand who's going to be responsible for all of those expenses. And as Jason mentioned earlier, when it comes to the wills and the beneficiary designations, lots of work that needs to be done here. And as I mentioned, I think earlier, is that you really have to continually work on it. So expect it to be complicated, but if you both work together, it's easy to get to what I'll call a reasonable resolution on it.
Yeah, and I think it's such a good point, and we've seen it firsthand in many instances. The difference between kind of being proactive and doing what Alp was just describing, right? Being open and talking about it, writing some things down, and even sitting down, right, with a professional advisor to say, oh, hey, what are the things we haven't thought of, right? Because this is what, Alp and me and our team, we do all day, every day, is think about these things, right? And help folks, be proactive to avoid some of those pitfalls that on the backside, we've seen, couples come to us and just kind of, the comments literally are, oh, if only we had, done this 10 years ago, right? Things would be so much smoother and in a better situation. So definitely recommend, that combination, right? Open communication with your significant other, and in some cases that can be difficult, right? We make it seem so easy, right? In theory, yeah, just communicate, right, with your spouse. That's one of the other areas where we've seen it play out right in front of us too, is just having sort of that neutral third party sitting down with us, to where, hey, we can just talk through things in a very matter-of-fact way, and recognizing, a lot of the different, emotional dynamics, because we've seen many of those. And that can also serve as a very valuable piece to, okay, we can do this, right? It's not it's not rocket science. There are a lot of steps, but you just check them off and get them taken care of.
And I'll say one of the only times that I'll say it's been relatively easy is when in that second marriage, if both parties actually have similar assets, right? Then they can say, yes, I'm going to keep my assets for my kids when it comes to retirement accounts, and you can keep your assets for your kids when it comes to retirement accounts. And also throw out one of the things that can actually help resolve some of these issues. If both parties are still insurable, a lot of times we see life insurance come into play, where let's just say, in the second marriage, one person has a lot of assets, but they really want to take care of the new spouse. So they could potentially put a life insurance plan in place to cover any kind of discrepancies when it comes to, dividing up assets in the event of an untimely death.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. So kind of coming back to where we started a little bit here, and we'll try to wrap up. I know we try to kind of keep these to about 45 minutes, so I think we're doing well on time. I strongly suggest setting aside, right, a time, and whether it's impromptu or just scheduling it, right, what works best for you and your significant other, to have the money conversation. And one of the things that we have actually put together, we have the workbook that goes along with this presentation. As a part of the follow-up for everybody that signed up today, we'll be sending out the link to the recording, but we'll also be sending out a workbook that goes with it that can kind of help serve as a good, whether it needs to be an icebreaker, right, or just kind of a nice guide to get that conversation started and rolling. And then I think one of the best questions that I've sort of heard and seen when kind of helping to get that conversation going, and this doesn't have to be formal, right? And hey, this would be great early in the relationship, but we've seen it even if it's a well-established relationship, where you say, oh, you know what? Maybe I've never really heard you describe kind of what was the relationship with money in your household growing up, right? And that can give you a lot of insight into your significant other's sort of background, because that's the reality is most folks in this country, for sure, they learn about money informally, right? Very few schools teach, just the basics of money management, let alone some of the more complex areas of money management. And so most folks, they just sort of learn it from seeing and soaking in what they saw as a kid growing up, and the way that their parents kind of handled money, how they split the responsibilities up, right? And so I think this just can serve as a really, really great way to kind of again break that ice and facilitate that conversation. So as I mentioned before, as we wrap things up here, we've got a lot of recordings of previous webinars and workshops, lots of different worksheets and kind of one-pager infographic type material that's helpful. So please join our community and follow us along. We will continue to have our monthly workshops via webinar until we can kind of get back in person, which we'd love to do sometime soon. Here's our great team. You have Alp and my email addresses there, as we mentioned early on. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions specific to today's workshop or anything else that just kind of may have sparked your thought process. I'll just repeat what I said early on. We love helping folks kind of think through, kind of what's the best plan for themselves. Happy to have, no obligation, just sort of initial conversation to help you determine what might be your best course going forward, and whether that may or may not be working with an individual financial advisor.
And Jason, we had a few questions, I think, that were sent in prior.
Let's get back to that.
I also want to add, this is what we'll call the financial groups team. There's a separate team for AFS 401k retirement services, and we know a few people on the webinar today are actually from some of our 401k clients, and obviously that team is still intact.
And I believe one of the questions was kind of related to the retirement plan that we received. Let me get that in front of me, make sure I don't miss it. Where are we? Do you have in front of you, Alp?
Yes. So
okay,
what is the age that one can withdraw from their, I won't name the company, from their 401k account? And so it differs if you're still working versus not working there. So if you're working at a company, some companies allow for early distributions at age 59 and a half. Some will also allow for hardship distributions. And if the company has signed on to some of the plan amendments related to the COVID distribution, so if your family's been dramatically impacted by the COVID situation, you potentially can get some distributions from workplace retirement plans or individual retirement accounts that are very tax favorable right now. So it varies by company. Another question, go ahead.
Before you do that one up, I was just going to add to that response. For individual retirement accounts, the standard age for being able to draw money out without penalty is 59 and a half. As Alp said, there is a little nuance with 401k plans that for some folks, you can actually avoid that penalty starting at age 55. That is actually something we were helping with some clients earlier this week, thinking about, somebody's going to be retiring before age 59 and a half. They got money in the 401k and they might need to start drawing some money down. Keep that in the 401k because it does provide a little bit more flexibility potential there. But then also, 401ks, I'm not sure if your question, you were also curious about, whether maybe it's an old retirement plan from a prior employer. Some of the options that might be available to you is you can do a tax-free rollover into either your own individual retirement account, IRA, or depending on your current plan, if you're still working and enrolled in a 401k or 403b, many of the plans allow you to roll into your existing plan. So those are some of the potential options that may apply.
And another question was, is there a best practice for reconciling savings and debit accounts and how to tackle bills? Are there recommendations for how to handle our combination of credit cards?
That's an interesting question. So I'm not quite sure I understand. Alp, what do you think that they're kind of getting at there?
Well, I'm guessing it's different credit cards and just trying to figure out, how can we tackle it? I think it kind of goes back to our debt slide, knowing your debts and making sure, both partners understand these are the bills that are out there and that there's a plan in place to try to pay them off.
Yeah, I think definitely if it's especially credit card, right? That's one of those typically a high interest rate, right? The kind of debt that you want to get paid off as soon as possible. So yeah, one, if you're kind of coming together as a couple, bringing finances together, make sure you understand, okay, these are the debts that I'm kind of coming into the relationship with, and what's your significant other coming into the relationship with. And then, as Alp said, more importantly, okay, what's the plan to get out of that debt? Okay, hey, all right, so you're coming in with some credit card debt. All right, what's the plan to pay that off and not recur it? Right? Do you have a plan that's working, or what can we do to help each other? We oftentimes see folks that they might say, hey, that's your debt. Even though we're kind of coming together and we're mixing other things, we agree that, hey, that's your responsibility, even though we're kind of bringing other things together. Whether maybe it's student debt, right? That's a reality. There's no perfect answer, right? There's no one solution that works for everybody. Other folks come in and they agree that, oh yeah, you know what, we can do this. I can help you. We kind of mix it together and help you pay off some of your debt, knowing that, hey, maybe we'll be getting a mortgage together in the future too. But yeah, the first thing, and we actually have it in the worksheet, the workbook that we'll share, is just a simple place to kind of inventory. All right, these are the debts we have, the interest rates that we have, how to kind of then apply the hierarchy to prioritize. All right, which debts should we start going after first, and kind of the high interest rate debts versus the lower interest rate debts, and so forth.
Yeah, so the part of the question is, what's the best practice for reconciling savings and debit accounts? I mean, again, I think it's just putting everything down on paper and sitting down with your partner and just understanding where everything is and what's the plan to build on it and what's the plan to pay down the debts. It's really what we've gone over during the entire webinar. It's just understanding what the situation is and what are those top priorities and paying off the debts and trying to advance the financial situation.
Yeah. I don't think there's any again perfect solution, but it kind of goes back to that. Understand what's coming in and what's going out, and how do we make sure that it's in alignment, right? That we're hitting our goals for savings and not accumulating bad debt, high interest rate kind of debt, and moving
And if you
forward.
have any additional questions, you can always send them to us and we can address them with you individually. But for now, Jason, I think we've gone over the questions that we have.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you joining us today and the questions that you submitted. And we'll leave it at that. And I hope everyone stays safe. Yeah, kind of a rainy day, a dreary day around here today.
And I'll also say it's hard to believe it's almost November. So happy
Halloween.
Thanksgiving
Happy Halloween.
Yeah, happy Halloween, happy Thanksgiving, and happy holidays coming up. Take care.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.